What if I told you that your deepest desire for enlightenment is the very thing preventing you from attaining it? In the high, desolate caves of the Himalayas over 1,000 years ago, a man with skin tinged green from a diet of nettles realized a truth so brutal it remains censored by the mainstream spiritual industry today. His name was Milarepa. He wasn't just a saint. He was a revolutionary who understood that the spiritual search is often the ego's most clever disguise. We spend years chasing a state of peace, a feeling of nirvana, or a vision of the void. But according to the Milarepa Ultimatum, this chase is exactly why you remain unenlightened. You are not looking for the truth, you are looking for a more divine version of your own identity. If you are ready to stop chasing mirages and finally confront the reality that the seekers are the only ones who never find, subscribe now to Tibetan Wisdom Unveiled and hit the bell icon to join our community of those who dare to see through the golden trap of the mind. Before we dismantle the illusions of the seeker, I want to be transparent with you. This video has been created with the support of artificial intelligence for narration and visual production. However, all the exhaustive research, the deep psychological analysis of Jungian archetypes, the curation of these ancient Tibetan concepts, and the entire narrative structure are 100% dedicated human work. My commitment is to provide you with profound, authentic, and high-quality content that challenges the modern Zen status quo. In the year 2026, the intersection of neurotechnology and ancient Dharma has revealed a startling biological reality. Harvard researchers have identified what they now call the seeker's loop, a specific neural pathway in the ventral striatum that becomes hyperactive during spiritual practices. For most people, the act of meditating, attending retreats, or reading sacred texts releases a steady stream of dopamine, much like a gambling addiction or the pursuit of professional status. The brain isn't looking for liberation, it's looking for the next spiritual high. We have turned nirvana into a consumer product, a golden butterfly that we try to catch, while our own ego builds a beautiful golden web to trap us. Milarepa saw this long before the age of fMRI scans. He realized that the ego is a master of adaptation. If it can't find satisfaction in money or sex, it will find it in the holy pursuit of emptiness. This is the ultimate ego trap because it is coated in the appearance of virtue. The tragedy of the modern seeker is that they are caught in what Carl Jung described as the shadow of holiness. We create a persona of a peaceful, enlightened being, while burying our primal drives even deeper into the unconscious. We believe we are moving toward the light, but we are actually building a more sophisticated cage for ourselves, a cage of spiritual icons and Zen routines that actually kill our true drive for awakening. Milarepa's journey started at the opposite end of the spectrum. He didn't begin as a saint, he began as a murderer, a man who used black magic to destroy his enemies in an act of cold vengeance. It was only when he reached the absolute bottom of human depravity that he realized the ego is a machine of suffering. He didn't need more spirituality. He needed to destroy the identity that was doing the seeking in the first place. When we look at the life of Milarepa, we see a man who was pushed to the absolute limit of psychological endurance by his teacher, Marpa the translator. Marpa didn't give Milarepa secret mantras or easy meditations. Instead, he forced him to build massive stone towers with his bare hands, only to command him to tear them down and start again, over and over. To the modern mind, this looks like abuse, but Marpa was performing a radical surgery on Milarepa's ego. He was destroying the seeker's expectation of progress. He was showing him that the spiritual path is not a staircase leading to a higher version of yourself, but a demolition site where your entire identity must be razed to the ground. This is why 99% of seekers never actually enter the void. They are too busy trying to decorate their internal cage with spiritual success. The spiritual dead end is a reality for almost everyone who thinks they are on a path. We use meditation as a way to feel better, to be more productive, or to escape the pain of our daily lives. But true Tibetan meditation, the kind Milarepa practiced in the dark cave of silence, is not about feeling better. It is about the complete dissolution of the one who wants to feel better. The neuroscans of 2026 show that when a practitioner enters this state of sudden stillness, the brain's me center doesn't just relax, it goes through a violent collapse. It is a biological reboot. The ego fights this because it senses its own death. This is why your Zen routine might actually be keeping you stuck in a loop of spiritual entertainment, preventing you from ever facing the terrifying and liberating reality of the void. Milarepa's skin turned green because he consumed nothing but nettles for years in his cave. He stripped away every comfort, every social mask, and even the sacred books of his time. He understood that the knowledge we gain from sutras and teachings can become another layer of the ego's armor. We collect spiritual concepts like we collect digital data, believing that more information equals more wisdom. But as Milarepa demonstrated, the concept must die for the truth to be born. You cannot find the void by filling your mind with theories about it. You must become the void. You must be willing to burn the sutras and face the silence of your own nature without the filter of a religious identity. In this exploration, we are not just talking about ancient history. We are talking about your current reality in 2026. We are examining how your brain is wired to sabotage your mastery by keeping you in a state of perpetual seeking. We will uncover the Milarepa Ultimatum, the radical demand to stop looking for nirvana as if it were a place or a destination. If you can understand why your spiritual search is keeping you unenlightened, you will finally have the key to the only door that matters. Stay with us as we move into the next chapters, where we will dive into the spiritual mirage, the anatomy of the ego trap, and the brutal techniques Marpa used to forge a master out of a murderer. Like this video if you are ready to face the truth that your ego is trying to hide from you. To understand the sheer brutality of the Milarepa Ultimatum, we must examine the architectural demolition of the soul known as the Towers of Marpa. When Milarepa approached the great translator, Marpa seeking the path to liberation, he expected secret initiations and mystical transmissions. Instead, he was met with a series of tasks that seemed designed to break his spirit rather than save it. Marpa commanded him to build a massive stone tower on a remote mountain ridge. With his bare hands, Milarepa hauled stones and mixed mortar, enduring physical agony and social isolation. But as soon as the structure was complete, Marpa would inspect it with a cold gaze and order him to tear it down and put every stone back where he found it. This happened not once, but several times, each time with a more demanding design. To the modern observer, this appears to be a case of senseless cruelty, but in the context of the radical Dharma, Marpa was performing a surgical extraction of Milarepa's ego. Every stone Milarepa carried represented a brick in the wall of his self-importance. By forcing him to build and destroy without reward, Marpa was showing him that the ego is addicted to meaningful progress. When the progress is stripped away, the ego begins to starve. This starvation of the ego is what most modern seekers are trying to avoid through their Zen routines. We have created a version of spirituality that is comfortable, predictable, and ultimately self-serving. We want the peace of meditation without the destruction of the identity that is doing the meditating. But the neuroscience of 2026 has confirmed that this comfortable approach is a biological dead end. When we engage in spiritual practices that only make us feel better, we are reinforcing the neural pathways of the self-referential network. We are not entering the void. We are simply redecorating the cell of our own prison. Marpa's method was the original neurohack. By creating a state of perpetual frustration and cognitive dissonance, he forced Milarepa's brain to abandon its old survival strategies. He moved the training from the intellectual mind to the very marrow of the bones. This is why 99% of seekers never actually enter the void. They are too busy looking for a temple of ice that melts as soon as they finish it. The spiritual ego is perhaps the most dangerous archetype we encounter on this path, and it is here that the insights of Carl Jung become vital. Jung observed that when the ego becomes aware of spiritual concepts, it doesn't necessarily dissolve. Instead, it often performs a maneuver called psychic inflation. It takes the gold of the unconscious and uses it to crown itself as a special being or an enlightened master. In the shadow of many humble meditators, there sits a shadow king, a giant, arrogant figure that thrives on the feeling of being more conscious than others. This is the enlightenment mirage that Milarepa warned against. Your spiritual search can become the very thing that keeps you unenlightened because it gives your ego a new, high-vibration identity to cling to. You become a spiritual seeker instead of a banker or a doctor, but the I at the center of the story remains just as rigid, just as defensive, and just as separate from the whole. This spiritual addiction is now being measured in the laboratory as a vibrational leakage. When we meditate to maintain an image of being zen or peaceful, we are constantly leaking energy to the social masks we wear. We are using the light of the Dharma to power a human battery that is actually repelling the hidden treasury of true realization. The brain in 2026 shows that this state of false peace is actually a thin sheet of ice over a dark, turbulent ocean of suppressed emotions. We are not calm, we are merely repressed. Milarepa's truth is brutal because it demands that we stop pretending. It demands that we face the nigredo, the blackening stage where our spiritual pride is burned away in the alchemical fire of total honesty. Only when you are willing to be nobody, to have nothing, and to achieve zero can you finally stop being a human battery for the expectations of others and start being a sovereign conduit for the void. The science of failure in spirituality often comes down to this. Your brain is wired to fight the Tibetan path because the path represents the death of the biological controller. The success saboteur inside your head is the part of you that wants to reach nirvana so it can finally feel safe and complete. But the void is not safe, and it is not complete in the way the ego understands it. The void is a radical emptiness that requires you to drop every chain of attachment, even the golden chains of your spiritual beliefs. Milarepa's skin turning green was not a sign of holiness. It was a sign of his absolute surrender to the environment and the moment. He stopped trying to manage his spiritual career and started living as the void itself. He realized that the Buddha he was looking for was not a floating deity in the sky, but the ordinary mind that remains when all the seeking, all the building, and all the spiritual entertainment finally stops. As we move forward, we must ask the question that science is only now beginning to formulate. What happens to the neural architecture when a person finally gives up the search? What happens when the seeker's loop in the brain is finally broken? The data suggests that this is the moment of sudden stillness, where the city of the mind freezes in time and a single, unconditioned consciousness emerges. It is the transition from a digital shadow to a pure reality. This is the Milarepa Ultimatum. You must be willing to let your Zen routine die so that your true nature can finally breathe. You must be willing to walk the lone wolf path, where there is zero support for your ego's need for validation and only the cold, clear light of the Himalayas to guide you. Like this video, if you are ready to stop feeding the Shadow King and start facing the silence of the cave. The collapse of the Nirvana Mirage is perhaps the most painful yet necessary transition for the serious practitioner. We are conditioned by our consumer-driven culture to view enlightenment as a distant, sparkling prize, a state of perpetual bliss that exists somewhere else, far from the grit and noise of our daily lives. But the Milarepa Ultimatum asserts that as long as you are looking for nirvana out there, you are merely entertaining a sophisticated projection of the ego. Your spiritual search is actually keeping you unenlightened because it is based on the premise that you are currently not enough, and that you need to acquire something holy to be complete. In the year 2026, clinical studies of long-term meditators have revealed a disturbing trend. Those most obsessed with reaching high states often show the highest levels of neurological stress in the amygdala when they are not meditating. They have created a Zen cage that feels peaceful, but it is a fragile piece that shatters the moment they leave their cushion. This is what we call the enlightenment mirage, a beautiful, golden garden that pixelates and reveals a grey wall of reality the moment you try to touch it. To break this mirage, Milarepa utilized the radical technology of Tummo, or inner heat. While the modern Zen routine often emphasizes a passive, soft form of relaxation, Tummo is an aggressive, fire-based practice that uses the body's internal friction as a fuel for awakening. Milarepa did not seek a calm, artificial lake of peace. He entered the storm. Under the lens of 2026 biohacking, Tummo is understood as a profound modulation of the mitochondrial output and the autonomic nervous system. It is the biological process of taking the cold of our suffering, our anxiety, and our failures, and transmuting them into a red-gold fire that burns in the navel. This fire does not just warm the body, it burns away the Zen fog and the spiritual icons that the ego uses to hide from the void. For Milarepa, sitting in the frozen peaks of the Himalayas, Tummo was not an elective exercise. It was a survival necessity. He learned that the only way to endure the cold was to become the fire. He realized that the chaos of the environment was not an obstacle, but the very catalyst required for his transmutation. This leads us to the most radical concept in the Tibetan Dharma, the ordinary mind. Many seekers believe that enlightenment is an extraordinary, supernatural state filled with light and celestial visions. But Milarepa, following the lineage of the Great Seal, or Mahamudra, taught that true realization is actually the return to the most basic, unconditioned state of being. It is a state that is so ordinary that we miss it every single day because we are looking for something more spiritual. The mente comum, or ordinary mind, is the consciousness that remains when you stop trying to fix your vibe, stop trying to meditate for success, and stop trying to reach a nirvana that exists only in your imagination. It is the silence of truth that emerges when the holographic show of your spiritual visions is finally turned off. In 2026, we describe this as neural silence, a state where all the noise and red alert areas of the brain scan turn into a deep, calm blue, showing a mind that is no longer fighting itself. The Milarepa Ultimatum is a warning that your spiritual search is a trap because it is often a search for the special. We want to be a lobo solitario of the consciousness, but we want others to see us that way. We want the alone is power feeling, but we use it as a shield against our own feelings of inadequacy. Milarepa's ultimate success came from the fact that he was willing to be truly alone, not as a hero, but as a nobody in a cave. He realized that the spiritual dead end is reached when you realize that your entire path has been a sophisticated way of entertaining the ego. When you finally hit this wall, you have two choices. You can continue the mirage by finding a new teacher, a new ritual, or a new concept, or you can obey the ultimatum and stop. You can stand in the cave of silence and let the walls of your ego temple melt away. This stopping is the most difficult act for the modern brain, which is wired for constant accumulation and dopamine-driven progress. The 2026 data on vibration leakage shows that the more we try to be spiritual, the more we repel the very treasury of wisdom we seek. We are like a person trying to catch a floating golden butterfly. The more we reach for it, the further it stays out of reach. Milarepa's secret was that he stopped reaching. He realized that the butterfly and the seeker are made of the same golden mist. He understood that the universe is a mental simulation, a mirage of material, where the only solid thing is the awareness that is witnessing the glitch. When you realize that reality is fake, you stop trying to conquer it spiritually. You stop building temples of ice and start living as the void realized. The biology of failure in our spiritual life is often just the brain's refusal to let go of the success saboteur, the internal program that thinks it can win at Buddhism. We want to rewire our brain for total mastery, but we want the master to be our current ego. The Milarepa Ultimatum demands a much more brutal exchange. It asks for your entire identity in return for the truth. It asks you to burn the sutras and the concepts until only the emerald green eyes of the universe are looking back at you. It is the realization that seeking nirvana is the ultimate ego trap, because nirvana is the one thing the ego can never have. Nirvana is what remains when the ego is finally exhausted. If you are ready to stop being a human battery for your own spiritual ambitions and start facing the sudden stillness of your true nature, then the ultimatum has served its purpose. As we move toward the final conclusion of this series, we will examine the sovereign soul that emerges from the wreckage of the spiritual search. We will look at how to navigate the 2026 world not as a seeker of peace, but as a source of it. We will see how the cave of Milarepa is not a physical place, but a mental frequency that you can access in the middle of a crowded city street. Like this video if you are brave enough to stop seeking and start being. Help us bring this brutal, liberating truth to those who are tired of the Zen trap. The void is not a dead end. It is the only real beginning. The final integration of the Milarepa Ultimatum is not found in a retreat away from the world, but in the radical realization that the world itself is the cave. In the hyper-connected landscape of 2026, we are often led to believe that spiritual power requires isolation or specific atmospheric conditions. But the true sovereign soul understands that the void is portable. When Milarepa sat in his cave of silence, he wasn't just hiding from society. He was demonstrating that the only real silence is the one that exists within the center of a storm. This is the ultimate subversion of the modern spiritual search. You do not need to leave your city, your job, or your family to find the ordinary mind. You only need to stop using these things as excuses to build your ego's temple of ice. The moment you stop seeking a special, religious version of yourself, the sudden stillness that Milarepa discovered becomes your natural state of being. Even in the middle of a crowded city street, where every other person is a blur of digital noise and distraction, the neuroscience of this final transmutation reveals a fascinating shift in what researchers call the non-dual frequency of abundance. When the seeker's loop finally breaks, the brain stops repelling the hidden treasury of pure reality. We move from a biology of failure, where we are constantly sabotaged by our own need for spiritual progress, to a biology of mastery, where the heart center emits a steady, powerful golden wave that clears away the gray fog of existential anxiety. You are no longer a human battery being drained by the expectations of others. You have closed the circuit of your own energy. This is the real meaning of being mentally untouchable. It is not about being cold or indifferent, but about having a diamond-like clarity that the mirages of the material world can no longer distort. You are witnessing the reality glitch with eyes of solid amber gold, recognizing that while the simulation of samsara may be fake, the awareness watching it is the only solid truth. This is the end of the enlightenment mirage. The golden butterfly you were chasing has been revealed to be made of the same light as your own hands. As you stand on the cliff edge of your own consciousness, your body slowly turning into transparent golden mist, you realize that the quest was the only thing keeping the destination away. Milarepa's gaze, reflecting the entire universe, is now your own gaze. You have burned the sutras and the concepts until only the silence of truth remains, and in that silence, the question of whether you are enlightened or not becomes irrelevant. You are simply here. You are the sovereign master who has survived the forbidden zone of the ego and emerged with a soul of pure white light. As we conclude this investigation into the most brutal truth of the Tibetan Dharma, I want you to consider the weight of the silence that now follows. We have deconstructed the ego's most clever traps, examined the neuroscans of the failed seeker, and walked the path of the Iogue who chose nettles over a golden crown. The path ahead of you does not require more seeking, it requires more being. I want to know, which spiritual concept are you ready to burn today? Are you brave enough to stop looking for nirvana and finally face the ordinary mind? Share your reflections in the comments below. We are a community of those who have decided to stop entertaining the ego and start inhabiting the void. If this message has resonated with your deepest nature, like this video and share it with those who are still caught in the golden web of the search. Subscribe to Tibetan Wisdom Unveiled and join us as we continue to map the forbidden architecture of the enlightened brain. The cave is waiting, the sun is rising in your belly, and the search is finally over. See you in the void.